Well, summer's coming to an end, guys. It's time to move into that good old comfort food. I have a great Sunday soul food dinner for you to try. So guys, we're going to go ahead and get started with our pork chops because they are going to take the longest. I like to kind of cook things in order so everything is done at the same time. We're going to do some simple seasoning with these pork chops. We're going to just give them a nice, if you clean your pork chops, that's all I'm going to say. If you clean your pork chops, clean your pork chops. Once you're done, put them in a bowl. I have here some salt, some black pepper, some crushed red pepper, a little bit of garlic, and some paprika. We're not going to do any heavy seasoning on this, guys, because we're going to add flavors as we go. Once we get our meat nice and seasoned, we're going to go in with some flour. Now, we're not going to deep fry the pork chops. We are going to fry them, but I just want a light coating. I didn't want it too heavily breaded. If you prefer a more breaded pork chop, by all means, go in with a heavier coating of the flour. All right, once we get ready to fry our pork chops, you're going to go with your skillet. I have about I would say maybe like an inch and a half of oil in the pan. Like I said, we're not deep frying these. If you want to do a deep fry, that's totally up to you. I'm not really looking for that texture in this meal, but I did want to give them a nice fry. So you're going to go ahead and cook them until they are done. Now, my pork chops are kind of thick, so I think I cooked them all together about 10 or 12 minutes. You want to continue to flip them throughout the process until they reach a nice golden brown consistency. And when I have those pork chops going, I'm going to go and get my rice started. So for my rice, I do 1.5 cups of water for every cup of washed rice. Go ahead and get that in the pot and put it on medium heat. Now, as you can see, our first set of pork chops are so beautifully brown. Oh my God. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead and drain them on your rack. You know, I do a rack with my paper towel. Once you have your meat sit in the paper towel, it just takes away some of that crispiness. But go ahead and drain them on the rack, and then we're going to add our next set of pork chops. I think I did about 3 rounds for this batch. And once you have your next set of pork chops in there, go ahead and cook them until they are the same color. I just like a consistency of color throughout my meat. I like everything to look uniform. So as you can see to the right, we're going for a more rich brown color, as you can see. So go ahead and keep your pork chops going. I believe at minimum a pork chop needs to be cooked at least at an internal temperature of 140. But as you can see, we have our rice going. I did also make some cornbread. I will link my recipe to my cornbread in the description box. The difference with this one is I did not add honey. So if you want to see how I make that cornbread, I will link the video description in the box. Once that rice comes to a slight simmer, you're going to go ahead and stir it up, and then I cover and I put it on low until it simmers and all of the water is cooked out. About 15 or 20 minutes or so. Just keep an eye on it. And then you're going to go ahead and continue to cook the rest of your pork chops. Like I said, I did 3 rounds. I had about 6 pork chops. So actually it was about 5.5, but I'll just say 6. But as you can see, they both have that same, both batches have the same color as the first one, and the rice is done. I have some foil over the cornbread to keep it nice and warm, and also to keep the butter nice and melted into the bread. Now, once all of your pork chops are done, you're going to go and just use that same grease. We're going to use this for our gravy. Take out any chunks of like old flour or meat pieces because we want the gravy to be smooth. From there, I added some chopped garlic, and I added some more onion from the board that we heard earlier. This is just going to help to get the flavor started with the gravy. I do want a lot of gravy, so I put a nice amount of flour. You want to make sure you continue to whisk as you add your flour into your pan. This is going to help prevent lumps and to make sure that the gravy is nice and smooth. Once your flour is nice and cooked down, we're gonna add some chicken broth. I'm sorry, not chicken broth, but beef broth. I'm gonna guess that I use anywhere between 10 to 12 cups of water. It just depends on the consistency that you like. I like a nice thick gravy, but I don't like it too thick. But you'll just see as we go. You're gonna add the liquid to your liking once you get your gravy to the consistency that you desire. But the main thing is to continue to whisk throughout this process. You're gonna keep whisking and adding liquid until it's the consistency that you desire and until all of the flour bits are dissolved. It took me a little bit of time because I had a lot of gravy. If you're having less gravy, it shouldn't take as long. But because I want to be able to smother my meat and have enough for my rice, I wanted to have more than enough gravy to go around. But once you get to this step, as you can see, it's nice and silky. The gravy is nice and smooth, and the flour has, gone ahead and emulsified in our gravy. You may still see a few bits from the onion and the garlic that we put in earlier. From there, you're going to go and add some fresh chopped peppers. I have some red, green, and onion pepper for color, and then some more fresh onion. I like to add more vegetables once the gravy is done because if you add them too early, everything is going to cook down and the flavors won't be there. If you have fresh celery, I prefer that, but I did not, so I added some celery seed, which was just as good. We're going to go and season our flour. So I have my celery seeds, some crushed black pepper, some red pepper, some paprika, some dried parsley, and a little bit of salt. Make sure you season to taste on this, guys. But like I said, since we did not add a bunch of seasoning to our pork chops earlier, the gravy is going to help with the layering. So we didn't want to over season our pork chops, then have a very seasoned flour, then it just becomes too much. So it's all about balance. Once my gravy was done, I went and I got my larger pot. That way I can have enough space for my meat and my gravy. I just put my stock pot on the aisle. I added my pork chops, and then I poured the gravy. Now, I only put four of the chops in the gravy. My husband doesn't like his smothered. I just do like a layer of gravy on his. You'll see that later. But for the rest of us, we wanted our smothered. So you put them in the pan, and then we just poured our gravy on top and let it simmer down. All right, guys, look at this beautiful gravy. Doesn't that just look so delicious? You can see all of the spices in the gravy. It's the perfect consistency. It's not too thick. It's not too runny. It is just heavenly. And now we're going to get started on our green beans. I did use my same skillet that I used to cook those pork chops. We're not going to have a bunch of dishes laying around, so I went ahead and washed that out. I dropped my olive oil in there, and I'm just going to saute some garlic. I cut the pieces a bit bigger for the green beans. I like a nice chunk of garlic in my beans. And then I added some chopped onions, and we're just going to saute that down a bit. And before we added our green beans. Now, I am going to use some fresh green beans. They are pre-washed and ready to go, but I'm still going to rinse them off anyway. I can't just throw them in a pot. I have to rinse them off myself. So once they were rinsed, I went ahead and I added them to our pan. Once you get your greens in the pan, I'm going to go and give them a nice toss to kind of get them in some of that oil and get a little bit of that garlic and onion flavor in the beans. And then to season them, I added some chicken bouillon or chicken base. You're also going to add some salt, pepper, garlic, and some crushed pepper. We're going to do a little sauce with this, with some butter later, and a little bit of a secret ingredient, which you'll see shortly. About halfway through the cooking process, I added a little bit of water to the bottom of the pan. This will help to steam the beans and help us to develop a little sauce once we add our butter. Just make sure that you're keeping everything clean as you go. That gravy can make a mess on that stove, but I just like to kind of clean as I go. It just makes it easier at night with getting everything done. And then there's our butter. Once you add that, you're just going to melt that down into the pan, and then we're going to go on to our last step. All right, then for our last step, we're going to go in with a few dashes of some red wine vinegar. The red wine vinegar gives it a nice little vinegary taste and just brings everything together. Just kind of give it a little bit different taste from your normal green bean. But look at that nice little sauce that was created. So you want to get your green beans nice and tossed in there. We don't want to overcook the beans. I like mine to still have a little crunch, but I do like them to be tender as well. Now that everything is done, it's time to plate it up. I got me a good old-fashioned ice cream scoop, the jumbo one. Got me a scoop of rice. Put down my green beans. Make sure if you do this, you go ahead and grab some of those onion and garlic when you put your beans in, and that beautiful thick pork chop that was smothered in gravy. Look at that bad boy up on that rice. And then put as much gravy as you want. I like a lot of gravy on my rice, and I put a little bit extra on my meat. And don't forget a nice slice of that cornbread that we made. Look how high and fluffy that bread is. It is so tender. But look how that dinner came together. Everything is still warm. You didn't have to warm everything up. If you cook everything at the right temperature and the right timing, everything will stay warm. But look how beautiful. And this is how the plate looks for the other pork chop, the one that wasn't smothered in the gravy. You can just lay some gravy on top if you have a picky eater like my husband. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.